Welcome back to Inside the Vault, episode 50. I'm your host, Ryan Smith, and my guest tonight, he is a second-time appearance here on Inside the Vault, co-host of 7:30 The Game on 7:30 Charlotte. He is Mark Yarbro. Mark, how's it going?
Good, Ryan. Thank you for having me back, man. I appreciate it.
Yep. Let's just get right into it. Slow news day in Charlotte this week. Not much going on at all, but we'll go ahead and just get right into it. So Bryce Young is starting this week, back in the saddle again for the Carolina Panthers after the unfortunate events of Andy Dalton and his car accident. Good to see him and his family are okay and going to be fine. Just a sprained thumb, no worse for the weary for Andy, but it will keep him out this week in the starter position. What are you expecting from Bryce specifically as he starts his first game since Chargers in week number 2 on Sunday against this Denver Broncos defense that is top 10 in the league in a lot of categories and not exactly the best spot for him to come back into the starting role?
No, it's not an ideal spot for him to come back to the starting job on the road in Denver against a really good defense, like you said. Look, he's got to look at this as another opportunity. I'm not sure if he thought he would get another shot here to be the starter, but here we are. And as you said, luckily Andy and his family are going to be fine after that car accident on Tuesday. But he's got to take advantage of this, Ryan. This feels like maybe his last go around here already. If he's going to be the long-term answer at quarterback. So he's got to play with some confidence. And if I'm him, hey, man, I just let it fly. He's got nothing to lose here. He's got to try to take advantage of this. Yes, this defense he's going up against on Sunday is tough, and it's going to be hard to put up huge numbers. But if he just goes out and plays error-free football, he doesn't have to be spectacular. He just needs to be solid and not turn the ball over and not put this defense, which is another story in itself, in bad spots. Then, I think you get through this, and then maybe he gets another shot next Sunday against the Saints here at home. But you got to focus on Sunday. It's a tough task against this defense. I'm actually interested to see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really good test for him. I mean, even if they don't win the game, if they just keep it competitive, keep it close, and actually show some progress, show some quarterback-yield play in the NFL, which we haven't seen outside of the Green Bay game last year really at all from him. I mean, heck, if they win this game and Bryce throws for 3 touchdowns, no interception, people are going to go crazy if something like that happens.
They will go crazy. And I'll say this: if Bryce Young throws for 3 touchdowns, 300 yards, or whatever, you need to go to Vegas and get a lottery ticket or something, because that feels like that's about as much chance of that happening as winning the lottery. But no, and that's what I just said. I don't even think he needs to go out there and throw a bunch of touchdowns and throw for a bunch of yards. Just be solid, man. If you go for $175, 200 yards, you don't turn the ball over. I would look at that as a successful afternoon for Bryce Young.
Yeah. Well, the trade deadline is coming up, ironically, the same day as the election of all things. I don't know why the NFL made that decision, but, neither here or there. Looks like the Panthers might be sellers at the deadline. That's what they should be anyway. But some of the names that I've heard come up recently, I'm not sure of your thoughts. Miles Sanders at running back, and then obviously the 2 receivers, Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen. I don't think Chuba Hubbard gets moved despite his really good standing in the NFL rushing yards category. I believe second behind Derrick Henry in the NFL this season. Maybe third, maybe my number was wrong on that. But don't think he gets moved. But what are you hearing on that front? Do you think someone like a Miles Sanders gets moved, or a Adam Thielen, or a Deontay Johnson? Or do you think all of them moved, or just maybe Morgan just stands pat and says we got to build around something. We can't just keep offloading guys like Brian Burns, Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore. We can't just keep trading away our good players. We gotta keep some foundational pieces.
Right. And look, with Chuba, obviously he's a free agent at the end of the season, and I think he'd like to stay here. I think the Panthers would like to bring him back at a reasonable price. So we'll see what happens there. So I don't think he's going to get moved. The 2 receivers you mentioned, obviously, I think are the 2 guys I would look at and say, I think one of those guys could get moved, Deontay Johnson or Adam Thielen. I know Thielen's coming back from the injury, but I think he could still be a guy that could help a contender. A team like Tampa, who just lost Mike Evans for 4 weeks. Chris Godwin's out for the rest of the season after breaking his ankle. I think he could be a fit there if Tampa. And I know some people like, you don't trade within your division. And at this point, you're the Panthers. You trade with anybody. You're not going to sit there and not trade with Tampa because you might give up Adam Thielen. But Deontay Johnson obviously is the guy I think nationally people are looking at as possibly being traded here. I know he's had the ankle issue, and he's got a rib issue, which he hasn't missed any games. He hasn't practiced, but he's expected to play again Sunday out in Denver. So those are really the two guys I look at. Miles Sanders, possibly. He hasn't done a lot the last year and a half that he's been here. So I'm not sure if anybody feels like he could come add anything to their offensive situation. But Johnson and Thielen are the two guys. I think one of those could get moved.
Well, this is my guess, and this is just a pure guess. I think Dan Morgan approaches Deontay Johnson and says, "Hey, we want to sign you long term. We like you. There's a reason we traded for you and shipped Deontay Johnson out of here. We'd love for you to stay in Carolina, and just be honest up front, man to man. If the answer, if you would like to stay here, if you would like to build something with us long term, let's find the right price. Let's get you signed up. If realistically, if you say no, no matter how much money you throw at me, I'm not staying here." You go ahead and if that's the case, then we'll try to find a good home for you. Do you think that's how they're approaching it, or do you think it could be as simple as, if the right price comes along, great. If not, he's staying.
Yeah, I think the Panthers would like to have him back next year. It's kind of like what I just talked about with Chuba. I think they'd like to have him back. Deontay's obviously got a figure in his mind that he's going to want to see. I'm not sure if the Panthers are going to be ready to do that. But I know he said even today, with all the trade rumors swirling, he said, "Look, I'd like to be here." Now, of course, that's what else is he going to say? I don't want to be here. I want to be traded. No, he's going to say the right thing.
Well, he could have just said, "I'm here."
I'm not sure how Dan Morgan and company would approach this. I don't know if even contracts have come up. I think I kind of side with you. I think they're listening. If something rattles their cage where they like it, I think he'll get moved. If not, then I think they're ready to ride this thing out the rest of the season. Hopefully they can re-sign him at the end of the year to a long-term deal.
Well, a couple more on Bryce specifically. Let's go back and drill down on him for just a few minutes. You talking to some Panther fans and even some content creators like myself, it seems like Dave Canales, I don't want to say he needs PR training. I think that's a little harsh, but I think some people are, it's like, well, you just say Andy was the guy that gives us the best chance to win games, and that was then that was before the accident, of course, and then Bryce, gets his opportunity, which kind of was brought to him, but then at the same time, when you ask Canales about Bryce and any type of trade or even, long term before the accident, it was like, nope, we're focused on Andy. We're focused on the Broncos. He doesn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. So my question is, do you think Canales still believes in Bryce? Do you still believe he thinks he can be a guy here long term? He's to see more? Or is it as simple as, no, he's out on him and he wants to pick his own guy, whether that's Andy Dalton or somebody else in the draft next year?
Yeah, look, Ryan, he made the switch after 2 games. After 2 games, he went to Andy Dalton. And he has said numerous times before Andy was in this accident, he gives us the best chance to win. That doesn't sound like a guy who's convinced Bryce Young can be his guy going forward. And the key is, he wasn't his guy. Dave Canales wasn't here when Bryce Young was selected. Dave Canales had nothing to do with that. So it's not like they're tied at the hip. So you mentioned earlier about the PR thing, and I go back to the Chicago game when he took Andy out late. He brought Bryce in, and then after the game was asked about it, and he said, "Well, our offensive line was beat up. I didn't want to put Andy behind him." So what you said, you're good putting Bryce behind that offensive line, but you weren't good putting Andy behind it. And I think he kind of the next day kind of tried to walk that back a little bit, but that wasn't a great move. Look, we all know that might be the case, but you don't come out and say that in public the way he did. So I know he's learning on the job here as a first year as a head coach, but I look at it like this. Again, I go back to this. He took Bryce out after 2 games and was ready to go to Andy. So I don't think there's any connection there to Bryce where he feels like, hey, I've got to stand by this guy. I think Dave Canales saw what happened last year with Frank Reich, who got fired in the middle of the season because Bryce Young wasn't having a very good season, and that was part of it. And I think Dave Canales, after 2 games, said, that's not going to be me. I'm not going to lose my job because of the quarterback play. So I'm going to put a guy in there I feel like can at least help us win. So I don't think right now he looks at Bryce Young as the long-term future here.
Well, it's all about, it's not just Bryce, it's the 52 other guys in the locker room as
Well,
well.
yeah,
They don't care about your 3-year rebuild. They don't care about that. They
no,
want to
exactly right. That's
win.
exactly right. And I think you go back to that Chargers game, Ryan. You can, if you watch the game, you could feel the frustration building with those guys with Bryce. You could feel his receivers starting to get frustrated. And I think Dave Canal, and it was funny after the game, he said Bryce is still our guy. And then 12 hours later or whatever, he made the switch to Andy Dalton. So no, you want to those guys. You're right. The guys in the locker room don't want to hear about a rebuild. They don't want to hear about we're working to plan for the future. There's guys in there that want to win now. They don't care what's going to happen 3 years from now.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, this is my I looked up, I talked to a lot of people and, looked at a lot of different articles, when that kind of got first mentioned. And, I think it was Charles Robinson of yahoo.com that had a quote in there that said something along the lines of, I talked to someone in the building and it seems like this is not a Bryce is done in Carolina situation. It's more of a let's let him reset. Let's let him sit and kind of chill out because he didn't really get to have that last year with Frank Reich. Like you said, it was kind of throw him to the wolves and no protection and lack of separation at the receivers minus Adam Thielen.
Lack of continuity within the coaches. I mean, you had Frank Reich call plays.
Right. So So I think this was this was more of a sit down. I think Rappaport mentioned that the other day on NFL Network that they were always going to go back to Bryce. The accident, though, specifically obviously moved that timeline, I think, back up. My original prediction was after the Germany game in the bye week. Mm-hmm. That was my prediction, but obviously that got moved up because of the injury. And yes, I think.
Let me stop you there. It's interesting that you picked that game because we know who's coming in. That's the Chiefs. And you talk about defenses that you don't want him going up against Denver this week. I'm not sure you wanted Bryce going up against that Chiefs defense either, but it could be a moot point at this point. He could be still the starter there. So
yeah. Well, at the end of the day, we'll just have to see what happens. It all hinges on. I mean, this Denver game for Bryce is for a lot of marbles. It's going to be fascinating to see what he does with it. And the other thing people talked about, and I know you're in there, so you can kind of maybe spell this rumor. Some people are like, well, he doesn't show enough emotion at the mic or when they're at his locker when they're like, come on, like this is your second chance. How do you feel? And it's people are like, well, he doesn't show a lot of emotion. I don't know if I can get behind that. But I'm not concerned with that. Like that's how Bryce is. That's always how he's been. Like personally, I don't put a lot of stock in that. I know some people are like, come on, Bryce, show some more emotion. But I don't put a lot of stock in that. Do you think that?
Yeah, he is who he is, as you said. Would I like to see a little bit more fire? Yes, I'll raise my hand and tell you, yes, I would like to see it. But in the end, it doesn't matter if you show fire. If you go out there and play well, people aren't going to care how you're acting at your locker or how you're acting at a press conference. They just want to see results. And if Bryce Young goes out there Sunday, throws for $175, 200 yards, maybe a touchdown, doesn't turn the ball over, I don't think people are going to care how he acts after the game or leading up to the game. They just want to see results. So it's who he is. He's not a fiery guy. But I don't think he was a fiery guy in Alabama, and it worked there, but it hasn't translated into the NFL yet.
Yeah. Well, in the time we have remaining, let's switch to the defensive side of the ball, and then
do we have to?
I'll keep it quick.
There's not much
only
to
a couple
here,
on this. So talking to a lot of people, it seems like we want to put Yarbro at the stake, because of the 3-4 and not working in Carolina this year. They brought back every single defensive staff member from the safeties coach all the way up to defensive coordinator. And that doesn't happen a lot in the NFL, hardly ever. But the Carolina has always been a 4-3 type defense. And now we've run the 4-3 with Yarbro over the last 2 years. And listen, this is my theory. He obviously didn't ask for Derek Brown to go down. He didn't ask for Shaq Thompson to go down. But so it is next man up, like the NFL mantra is. But at the same time, when it comes to the Panthers drafts over the last 6 years, I looked this up. I think it's something like 18 out of 40 draft picks are left. And so like that's 22
Right.
picks that are no longer in Carolina from like the 2020 draft to 2024. I actually might be 2019, somewhere in that range. So that's a lot of depth pieces that got missed and are no longer in Carolina that could be very serviceable if a guy like, say, Derek Brown, say, Shaq Thompson were to go down. You have pieces there that can be that depth piece, that backup piece that can come in and be some good snaps for you and be those guys that you've developed homegrown talent. Well, those guys just aren't here right now. And I think that's definitely a huge part of it is the lack of depth is because of the missed draft picks. And some of these guys just aren't NFL caliber players that are currently playing on this defense. And that's not a Jero Avero's fault. But at the same time, some people point to guys like Jordan Fuller. I know he got hurt, but Josie Jewell, another guy that got hurt, and a few other guys that were from this Broncos or Rams defense. Nick Scott is another one where they just come in and they either got hurt early or their play hasn't done very well. And they all of a sudden are either out of a job or are in the training room because they're hurt. And these are guys that Jero Avero wanted to come in because they were familiar with his scheme. DJ Johnson was someone he was very responsible when drafting. So what side of the fence do you stand on that? Do you think he'll leave Carolina this year, regardless of, what happens? Do you think he'll ask out of his contract? Or do you think this could be something where he gets everyone back healthy, 2025, let's reset, year 3, assuming he doesn't get a head coaching job, which I can't imagine no one's going to coach him this year.
Yeah, I think that head coaching ship has sailed for now for him. I don't expect him back next year. I think this could be a mutual kind of parting of the ways. I know Dave, when he was hired, talked about wanting to have him back on board on that. But Ryan, you just touched on it. It's the talent level. The talent level is very thin across the board, really. More on the it's more thin on the defense than it is on the offense.
Yeah.
Look, we talked about before the season started. This team could ill afford to have injuries, particularly on defense, because as you just said, the talent is not there. So when you go sign a DJ Wanham in free agency, and we are just now seeing him get on the practice field this week because of the quad injury, and then we got more details today on exactly what was going on with the blood clots and all that, and thankfully he got through that, and we may see him on the field this year, but you don't have him. You trade Brian Burns. Frankie Lulu goes to Washington in free agency. You lost talent. You can say what you want about Brian Burns, but he's still a better pass rusher than anybody you've got on this roster right now. So that was a big loss. You mentioned the injuries, Derek Brown, Josie Jewell. These are just injuries this team couldn't afford, and they've had them, and it's been the worst case scenario. So, yeah, I don't think he's completely absolved of any blame, because there's still things that happen, like guys, if you are in a position, make a play, get a guy to the ground.
I was going to say the tackling has not been good.
Tackling has been atrocious. You go back to that Bengals game when 3 guys had a shot at Jamar Chase and nobody could get him on the ground. And there's been this past week, it was bad again. It's been bad all year. But no, the talent level, and you can thank Scott Fitterer for a big part of that, of why the talent level is as bare as it is right now. And look, Dan Morgan was in that room, so I don't know if he's completely absolved himself. Now, you can't put all this on Dan Morgan and tie him to what happened in the past, but Dan Morgan's got his work cut out for him to build this roster back up, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be a one-year fix. This is going to take time, and back to your point about the draft, yeah, they've been missing on these guys. You have got to start hitting on these guys, and that's what Dan Morgan tried to do last year in the draft. Now, that draft obviously was focused on the offense, trying to help Bryce Young. This coming draft, I would think it is going to be defense heavy. Yeah, you may end up having to draft another quarterback, but you have got to find some edge rushers. You've got to find probably some guys in the secondary, and whether it be through free agency or the draft, those are areas that you desperately need. And that's why this is big. If you can get DJ Wanham back and just see him for a handful of games this year, at least if he gives you something, you can feel like, okay, that's a piece going forward next year that we feel good about. and maybe you get him some help on that other side.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm personally a big believer in pretty much draft all defense in this upcoming draft. And then maybe one more receiver with that high pick. If you're drafting number one, if you're drafting number two, I'd really consider a Travis Hunter, a Ted McMillan from Arizona, somebody like that. Luther from Missouri. Can't remember his last name at the moment. Or some defensive guys myself. But that's a mock draft for another day. But yeah, I personally, I'm not into the whole quarterback thing for this draft, no matter how good Bryce does, or bad he does. My personal opinion: resign Andy to a 1-year deal, maybe two, or somebody else in free agency that's not Andy, and then bring them back, have them compete with Bryce another year in the draft with defensive players, some more talent around Bryce. And then after year 3, this is what Zach Wilson and the Jets did. If still things aren't happening at that point, then maybe you can move on from him at that point, and then maybe go get your quarterback in 2026. Because, like you said, it's going to be a multiple year thing for this team, and I think defense is the way to go for this particular draft. But moving on before we get you out of here, and again, Mark Yarbro, host of 7:30 The Game in Charlotte, is my guest today on Inside the Vault, episode number 50 here on Inside the Vault. Looking ahead to the cap and some of the situations this offseason, guys, some of the injured guys, I'll bring up a couple names and we'll kind of play rapid fire, just kind of a yes or no, or you can expand however you want. Guys that I'm looking at, have they played their last snaps in Carolina or currently playing, and this is their last season? So a couple of guys that I think are very key guys I wanted to bring up. Number one, obviously, is Shaq Thompson. I think he very well could have played his last down in Carolina based on the contract situation and the amount of money that we're paying him. Do you see him signing like a bridge deal, a lower cost, prove it deal that he's healthy, or do you see him kind of going his separate way? Because he's already said, I ain't retiring. I'm still playing next year, whether it's here or somewhere else.
I have said this before, where I thought he was done here, and then he ends up back here. I will say it again. I don't anticipate him being back here. I just think with the age, with the injury history, I think that the Panthers will choose to move on. And he may do a deal like a Thomas Davis, who finished his career in Washington. Maybe Shaq Thompson finished his career there somewhere else. But I don't anticipate him finishing his career here with the Panthers.
Another one is Austin Corbett, who sadly his body seems to be breaking down on him. 3 straight years of injuries. It seems like Brady Christensen, as we saw, has had a lot of good moments at center these last 2 games. Personally, I think you sign Brady, make him your long-term center, and then you move on from Corbett. Do you get the sense that might be where that's headed, or something similar?
Yes. Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think Brady's done a nice job. You mentioned it. I think every week at Pro Football Focus, his grade has come out. I think he graded up 85 this past week against Washington. And it's unfortunate. The cap hit. I just think that's the Panthers going to move on from him, and I think they'll be comfortable with Brady Christensen as their starting center going forward.
Yeah, and then the last one is someone that has an emotional tie, I think, to myself. Is Taylor Moton, the right tackle who just had his Ironman streak snapped, but has been a serviceable right tackle for the Panthers for a long time. Is he someone that you consider moving on from? I think he has like an $18 million cap hit this offseason. But I personally like Taylor Moton, and I don't see them moving on from him, but maybe sign him to an extension. That's how you can lower that cap number down. What say you on Taylor Moton? And the other guy that I wanted to mention, last guy, is Taylor Moton, right tackle for the Panthers. Just had his Ironman streak snapped, missed the last 2 games. Josh Nyman was his replacement. Do you see them moving on from a guy like Taylor Moton, the $18 million cap hit this offseason? I personally love the guy. I think he's been really serviceable and solid for the Panthers, and I think it would be quite a mistake to move on from someone like him.
got me?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so Taylor Moton, I was just saying, do
Yeah.
you feel like that could be someone who's they save $18 million if they move on from someone like him, but you could easily knock that down by signing an extension. I think Taylor Moton's been great for this franchise, and I just can't see them moving on from someone like him.
No, I don't think so. Look, this offensive line has done a pretty good job, I think. Even Icky, I don't think has been terrible at left tackle this year. But no, I would be surprised if they moved on from Taylor Moton. I know he's had the injury issue this season, but as you said, he's been very durable. Obviously, with that streak that he played, not missing a game. Yeah, I think they can rework that contract, rework those numbers, and I would be very surprised if Taylor Moton's not the starting right tackle here next year.
Well, Mark, as we finish up, always good to have you on here on Inside the Vault. Leave our listeners with something that they can kind of hang their hat on. Not necessarily, I'm saying for this Denver game on Sunday, which we'll get to. We'll get your prediction in a second, but for the rest of the season, maybe going into next year, 2025. What's something that you feel like Panther fans can kind of hang their hat on? It can be something team related or just individually with players that we have on this team that can bring kind of this positive energy, because it just seems like right now Panthers are kind of in a rut, and they fans are not enjoying this current state of the franchise for the past 7 years.
No, it's been rough. There's no doubt about it. I think what you look forward to, Ryan, at least the rest of the season. Look, we don't know what's going to happen at quarterback. I feel like Bryce is probably going to be the guy the rest of the season now that this has occurred. But who knows? Maybe Dave Canales comes out next week and says, we're going back to Andy. I don't know. But I think what you want to see is the continued development of guys that you drafted last year. Look at Xavier Legette. Look at JT Sanders. You're going to get Jonathan Brooks, hopefully, on the field here at some point. You're going to finally
I'm excited about him.
To see him. So, yeah, I think there is stuff there to look for. And if you can finish up this season at least feeling like, okay, that we've seen Trevin Wallace, at linebacker now with the injuries. I feel like if you can get those four guys, playing decent football, you can at least feel, okay, we got something out of last year's draft. Now we just need to find the answer at quarterback. But if you're looking for something positive, just keep an eye on those four guys from the draft and hopefully continue to watch them develop. And I'm with you. I'm anxious to see. I think we talked about it. I wasn't crazy about the Jonathan Brooks pick. I didn't really understand it, but I am anxious to see what he can do once he gets out there.
Well, that'll do it here for episode 50 of Inside the Vault. Mark Yarbro, co-host of 7:30 The Game on ESPN Charlotte 7:30. My guest today here on Inside the Vault. Mark, all the best to you. Thanks again for coming on our 50th episode, and we'll talk to you down the road. Thanks again.
Ryan, thank you for having me. It was an honor to be on your 50th episode. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Before I almost signed off, I just totally forgot. Do you have a prediction for the game on Sunday? Should we even say that, or we're just gonna say let's just keep it close, right? And that's what we're gonna say.
Yeah, it's funny today. We were saying how many points are the Panthers going to score? I said 16. My co-host Al Wallace, former Panther, said 13. Bobby Rosinski said 6. So
okay.
I think it's going to be tough. I think the Panthers probably lose this game. I'm going to say something to the effect of 27-16, something like that. It's not going to be embarrassingly bad, but I don't think it's going to be a very good result.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it there. Mark, thanks again, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Ryan, thanks, man. Take care.
All right, that'll wrap up this episode of Inside the Vault, episode 50. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Let us know how we're doing, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. All right.